Welcome back to this third video in this little mini series of making a .NET Core application run on an EC2 instance in Linux on AWS. And so what have we done? We've done step one was we packaged up the app, we pushed it to the web server and configured to where we can hit that web server. Video two, much shorter. We connected RDS, created a database, table, some data, then changed our connection string on the app so that we could see the data. In this one, we're going to go for this picture. We're going to have two separate web servers and two separate subnets, still talking to the database, but behind a load balancer so that traffic can be routed to either one. So let's start by going back to EC2. Let's look at this server. This server, I've given the name Web Server 1. If we look in here, let's make sure we do this first before we go and create the next server. If you look and see Subnet ID right here, we can see that this is in 2DF1. So let's go to the subnet sections. Here it is. Now this only shows 2DF1 because that's actually what's in this little search bar. By getting rid of that, I actually see all of our subnets, which is what I want. I want to give this subnet a name because this will help me identify this in a minute. And I also need to pick another subnet as my subnet 2. And so I'm going to pick this one that's in availability zone EU-West-2B. I'm going to name it subnet 2. All right. Now that I've got that, if we go back to EC2 and refresh, I will see now that it is on subnet 1. The next one I create, I'm going to put on subnet 2. So let's do it. This is going to be very similar to what we did last time. One minor change though. This part's the same, but when we get here, we're going to configure something because what I want to do is go ahead and select that new subnet. And so you can select no preference, which is the default, which is what happened last time. Well, this time I'm going to show a preference. I'm going to pick subnet 2. And so now this will get us essentially to this picture. Web server 1, web server 2, and different subnets. And at this point I can review and launch. I will use this key pair I created in the previous video and launch that guy. All right. While he's waiting, let's go ahead and name him Web Server 2. And last time what we did is we had to open up the port to allow traffic to come in on port 5000. We could assign them to the same security group. That would be a great idea. You could also just come in here, edit this, and create the rule in this launch wizard group. If you're going to have a lot of servers, it certainly makes sense to create one security group and use them for both. In this particular case, just doing this because this is fast. There we go. So we have traffic open for port 5000 there. Let's go back to our EC2 dashboard and let's see how it's doing. Web server 2 is still in an initializing state. Well, when this is done, what we're going to do is we're going to SSH in just to verify that we can connect to it, push the code up as we did before, run the code, go ahead and configure the connection string, and also change, if we take a look at the app settings file, we're going to change the server identifier to B. So that's really it before we go set up the load balancer, because at that point we'll have two servers running independently with the same code. Okay, looks like our server is ready. Let's look at the instance details. So here is the DNS name. So if we go back to up here, we already have our examples of SSHing in and SCPing. So I'm going to make a copy of this go. These are the two commands I'm going to want to use. So let's use this SSH command to see if we can get in. Let's open up a new tab. Yeah, this one will work. Yes, I want to connect. Excellent. I'm here. Do I see anything? No, it's a brand new server. Of course I don't see anything. So now I'm going to copy the file up. Now note, while this is uploading, the change we made to the app settings JSON locally, it's actually not going to be in that bundle. And the reason why it's not going to be in that bundle is because I did the publish command before I made this change to the app settings JSON. And so when we push this up, it's going to be blank, just like before. And that's fine. And that's a decent way to go. So we're just going to log in and set this. And then we're going to set this server identifier. Because the home controller, it pulls that server identifier out. And so this way we can visually see on the page which server we're actually hitting instead of having to look at the URL. Whenever we get this load balanced, we won't even be able to use the URL because we're going to be pointing to one URL and it's going to be load balancing, behind the scenes. So that's what we're going to do. So let's see if this is uploaded. It is. SSH. All right. Same as before. We're going to go and untar this. I need to go ahead and create a directory called app. Untar. And then I don't need this file anymore. I can go into app settings JSON and make those changes. Remember I for insert mode. Get me to where I want to go. Let's see. Oh, yeah, I need my connection string from here. Paste that in there. Go to the next line. Now escape to get out of insert mode. WQ to save and quit. And there we go. We now have a second web server that's configured but not running. And so let's show that, just in case you're curious. Get the domain. Let's see, this is our previous one. See, this is going to get confusing. Here's our previous one, and this is why this server identifier is useful. That's running A. So if we go to this new one, it's not running. So let's go back to our README and let's get our run command. And now it should work. See that it is web server B and this is web server A. Web server A can talk to the database. Web server B can talk to the database. Everything's good. So now let's go back to EC2 because the next step is to set up the load balancer. So how do we do that? Well, if you go look for load balancers, it'll just show you this, and it is actually in EC2, and so we don't have to go anywhere. I was at first confused by this. So over here on the left, if you just scroll down, there's load balancers. So what we want to do is balance web server 1 and web server 2, which are in different availability zones. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to be balancing those. So load balancers. All right, let's create one. And there's a number of steps here. It's we'll talk through it. It's not too complicated once you've done it a few times. And so I actually had to practice and create 2 or 3 load balancers before I got it right. Let's see if I can get it right the first time, this time. I'd recommend going and taking a look and seeing the difference between these two. We're just going to create a application load balancer. And so this is going to be my London app load balancer. It's going to be internet facing. It's going to listen on port 80. And remember how we named subnets? Here they are down here, so it's really obvious which ones we need to pick. Subnet 1 and Subnet 2. All right, next step. We did not specify anything for HTTPS. That is correct. All right, we'll just go with this default security group here. All right. Next, we need to create a target group. So new target group. This is going to be the London load balancer target group. And a target group is essentially the servers you're going to be putting under the load balancer. And so instance refers here to EC2. Protocol HTTP port 80. Now this right here is something we're going to want to change. And so health checks. How does the load balancer know if a server should be kept in the load balancer or it should be taken out? Well, it allows you to set up some settings here. And so we're not going to change any of this stuff down here. We're already returning a 200. And where are we doing that from? I'll remind you from here. This is from the health controller. Essentially, let's go to web server B. That's going to be right here. Right, there it is. The content, AWS is not looking at. What it's looking at is the status code. So let's go back to here and change this path to health. So as long as this will keep returning a 200, it should be fine. All right, let's register our targets. Here, we can see, hey, look, there's web server 1 and web server 2. We're going to select both of those, and then I'm going to not forget. And I forgot these several times before, which is why I'm pointing it out. First, they're running on port 5000. Let's go ahead and change that. And also, once we've done this, we can't just hit next review. We actually have to add to registered. So, Zone A, Zone B, these are 2 different web servers and our subnets. Let's review. Let's create. Excellent. Now it's in a provisioning state, and so let me do a little navigation here to show you some interesting things. So if we go back to our EC2 dashboard, here's our web servers. Remember that load balancing is down here. All right, we can also see our target groups here. All right, we set up our target group as a part of that wizard process we just went through. We can look at the targets and see here, well, these are our registered targets. What's going on? Well, it's still in the load balancer is still in a pending state. And so nothing's quite ready yet. So let's go back here and see where we're at. We're still in provisioning. Now, once again, looking around, we can see this is the DNS name. And so when this is working, and I'm assuming this is going to fail right now. Yep, that failed because it's not quite ready yet. So we just have to wait a little longer. Now, one thing we can do while we're waiting for this to provision is, I showed you the target groups. You can also go here to listeners, and then this will take you also to that target group that is set up for this load balancer. So if you have a lot of load balancers, this might be the best way to get there. But right now, with just one, it doesn't really matter. So that's all I want to show you right now. What I want to do is I'm just going to wait here, and we'll come back whenever this thing is done, and we will kick this back up again and test it. All right, let's see if our load balancer is ready. It is. It is marked as active. So now, in theory, I can go here to this URL for the load balancer, and it will work, in theory. If not, then we will have to debug. So here's A, there's B, here's A, those are still working. This isn't working yet, so let's go take a look. It's active, but I wonder if the target groups are actually active yet. So now these are showing as healthy. All right, so according to target groups, according to the target group, everything should be fine. It should be able to route between these two. And according to the load balancer, everything's active and ready to go. So if we go here, it should work, but it is not. So let's think about what might be going on. So I've already shown you where target groups are. You can get to it from listeners and going here or just going here, whatever is most convenient. The servers are healthy. Everything's fine. But it's not working. Well, let's check our security group. And so if we look here, because load balancers, like everything else, are attached to security groups, let's go take a look. If we look at inbound, we can see whenever we opened up MS SQL earlier. We can also see, oh, look at that. There's nothing for port 80 traffic. So let's change that. Add a rule. HTTP. I'm missing it. There it is. Okay. Now port 80 traffic can actually get in. Let's see if that's it. Yay! That worked. Okay, so in theory, if all the servers are still running, and I assume they are, we should be able to refresh a few times and eventually hit server B. Right now I'm refreshing and only getting server A. Let's see if our server's running. There's server A. This is to it directly. There's server B. It's running. That's interesting that it just keeps sending me to server A. Well, you know what would be a fun test for this? Would for me to go into server A, and I'll tell you what, let's just do this from EC2. If we go into EC2 and we go to our server A, which is web server 1, and we stop it. Stop. Yes. Here we go. Debugging by bringing our site down. If we go look at our target groups, we will see that, oh, web server 1, uh-oh. Hey, there's web server B. And so our web server was not exactly balancing me. It was just putting me always on server 1, but we can see now that server 2 is actually working. And so now let me go back to EC2. And if I start this guy up, if I start him up and restart the web server, or restart Kestrel, restart the app, it should get back into the pool and I should be able to use it again. Shouldn't have to change any of the other settings. Those should still be there. All right, looks like our server is back up and running. But before I restart the .NET app, I want to go to target groups. And I want to notice how, this is still unhealthy, right? I mean, we haven't started the app up yet. The health check is not going to return back a valid value, and so it's going to stay out. And so I want to come back here after we get this thing going. And so I'm going to go to this tab, go back to EC2. Here's web server 1. Now let's see if the public DNS name has changed at all. So if we go back to our README, we don't need to copy the files up again. We just stopped it and restarted it, so that would be unnecessary. So EC2 3.8.2.10, EC2, oh, it has definitely changed, and that's okay. Shouldn't matter for the load balancer, but it does for us because we have to SSH into an actual machine. So here we go. Let's do it. Here we are. We still have our app directory, of course. And now, before we actually get that started, let's get that server name. And server B has been up for a while. So if we refresh that, it's still going strong. Load balancer still has us on server B, because server A is dead. Not working. So back here, let's restart things. Now it should work. All right, server A, server B. Now quickly, if we go back here, it's still unhealthy. Let's refresh. Still unhealthy. So we breezed through this before whenever we created the load balancer. But in the health check settings, you can tell it how many times you want it to check to get a healthy response or an unhealthy response before it puts the server back in or takes it out. And so at this point, we should only have to wait until this becomes healthy again. And then server A will get put into the load balancer. So I'll just give this a little wait, and then we'll try it when this looks like it's healthy again. Okay, it looks like both our targets are now healthy, and they really should be. There's A, there's B. Now let's see if it'll actually bounce me. So it's got me back on A again. Repeatedly, back on A. And we can, just go do the test again just to make sure this is really what's going on. I'm going to go to web server 2, and I'm going to stop it. We're going to find out pretty quickly. The target group is going to notice, oh, it's already taken it out. We can now go back. And of course, B is not going to be there, and only A is going to be there. And there it is. B is now gone because I did stop it. So there you go. We've now worked through creating a second web server, putting the web servers in 2 separate subnets. We named them. We got that second one running. And then what we did is we created a load balancer. And because I forgot to open up port 5000, we couldn't get to the load balancer. And so what we did is we opened that up. And then to prove that it was actually using both servers when it wouldn't actually bounce me between server A and server B, we shut down a server and saw that it did in fact just fill over, which is one of the nice things about these load balancers. All right, that's that for that video. Good luck on setting up your own load balancers. Play with the settings, play with the health checks if you want to, but those are the basics.